Hi, my name is Caelean. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gauge, and we help brands show up in AI answers as well as optimize for AI agents.
So, Caelean, tell me a little bit about your journey because you did not start in marketing. You started in developer tools. Can you tell us how you got there?
Yeah, so in terms of my background, I kind of got involved with startups when I was in university. Started working as an intern for this company at the time called eShares, which then became Carta. And so really got to experience just the kind of rapid growth of kind of a startup and got really hooked on that. And so from there went to an early stage AI startup as a founding engineer, from there to another private market startup as a founding engineer. And so we got into YC, my co-founder and I, both as engineers, working on a developer tool problem that we had experienced many times over ourselves. And we actually were at this open source conference hosted by YC, where all these companies were coming up to talk, big developer tool companies, Supabase, Resend. We heard from a bunch of really large companies in the space. And unrelated to what they were actually talking about, they all mentioned that they had started to see leads and signups and inbound traffic from AI as a source. So people actually coming from ChatGPT.com, Claude.ai, and signing up for their products, learning about their products through that lens. And so we thought that's really interesting. We actually built a little MVP called Product Rank, put it out there, and saw pretty much near instant traction, and started working with a lot of those developer tool companies on marketing to AI.
So, tell me about the developer tool you were building at the time. What was the problem you were encountering that you were trying to solve for at the time?
So the fundamental problem that we saw was basically the larger an organization gets, the more individual developer velocity slows down. And a lot of that is due to the increasing complexity of the code base that you're operating in. And so when you have a greenfield code base, it's very easy to add features. When you have this big, large, complex code base, it becomes very hard. And that results in a lot of people moving from a monolith architecture to a microservices architecture. That specific problem is very, very painful. And so we were building software around solving that transition.
Did you have any users at the time when you decided to pivot?
We did. We built an open source project. We got to about 5 million downloads.
Oh, wow.
It was actually in use by NVIDIA, in use by Ramp, Rippling, number of large organizations. So it was not an easy decision.
Wow. How many weeks into YC were you when you made
This was actually post YC.
This was post YC?
Yeah, so post fundraise as well.
Oh my gosh, how much did you fundraise with your first idea?
We raised roughly 2.5 million coming out of YC.
Did you have anybody on your board at the time?
No, so we're lucky enough to, still.
Did you have any big investors that you kind of had to get on board, or?
Our investors were actually very supportive. I think, there's a realization at the very early stage that there's a lot of different paths that startups can take. And so I think we were more worried about it than our investors were at the time. We did have some investors that had very DevTools specific backgrounds, but that actually ended up kind of coming full circle in some of the stuff we're working on today.
So, okay, you get over 5 million downloads, which is a founder's dream. And what was your path to revenue? How were you going to monetize the business?
So that was one of the core struggles with the previous thing is we were building open source software. I think we were seeing relatively strong adoption, but really, really poor ability to monetize. And so revenue was fairly minimal, despite like these really large companies using us.
How were you originally thinking you were going to get revenue from these companies?
There were a number of things that we had built. We kind of had a hosted version of the open source service, and there were a few companies paying us for that. And there were, of course, like other things we could build into or build on top of it, but there wasn't a super clear path, I think. So, a lot of developer tools will build the product, kind of get adoption, and then hopefully figure that out later is actually a strategy that we have seen people utilize, but we basically got pulled so strongly in this other direction that we still do have the open source project. It's still alive and well. It's still being used by a number of organizations, but we are kind of like well past the revenue of the previous idea with the new one.
How big was the team when you guys decided to pivot?
Just my co-founder and I.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you pivoted, how soon after you moved into this new direction that you got signs that you were on the right path?
Probably within about 1 week.
Oh, wow.
So we really struck a chord with both the community, and that showed up pretty immediately in terms of revenue and growth. So we launched, kind of the new idea, the new thing on YC through their socials. And I booked out pretty much 3 months of demos, like morning to night, every single day. So there's just huge interest from the community. And those, I think it was roughly maybe 300 or so demos, pretty quickly materialized as strong revenue, design partners, and a lot of kind of core interest in, feedback on what to build. How to include it actually was part of that early cohort and provided a lot of really, really valuable feedback in building the product.
What was the first thing you built?
The very first thing we built before launching was this thing called productrank.ai. It's still live. It's just a free little site. You basically put in a category, and we ask AI to rank products in that category. And there's a little CTA there to share your email if you're interested in, getting your product ranked. And that is still getting a lot of traffic, doing quite well. From there, we basically started to build some analysis on that. So, when products or brands or services are getting recommended, why are they getting recommended? What sources are AI utilizing to kind of present that recommendation? What searches are AI making to the web to retrieve that information? There's kind of this deep well of data on how kind of AI operates, where AI is fundamentally like a black box. We don't have all the pieces, but what we can do is throw a ton of inputs and basically measure all of the outputs to derive or build a strategy around how to show up or how to better represent your brand within these answers.
What has surprised you the most about what you've learned by doing SEO, GEO for LLMs?
Yeah, the current meta is pretty shocking, actually, in terms of what works. The dominant strategy that we see a lot of organizations be successful with is to effectively write third-party content on your first-party website. And so what that ends up actually looking like is effectively, say like a list of recommendations or a list of brands, very similar to what an AI would give you in an answer if you were asking for a solution, but written from kind of a third-party perspective, but placed on a first-party website. So you'll see a lot of organizations effectively have these kind of listicles, and there's a lot of people that have kind of talked about this, where they're talking about kind of the whole space of brands in their industry, but then placing it on their first-party site.
So funny. It reminds me of the early days of SEO.
Yes.
That was the same thing. Do you feel like it's going to evolve in the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah. In some ways, it feels like we're kind of redoing SEO all over again. The strategies will definitely evolve and get more sophisticated over time. That was kind of like maybe even the higher level learning was that AI is actually incredibly naive in the way that it operates and the way that it retrieves information at this stage, much more so than you would think for something that maybe has kind of this aura of being very sophisticated.
What has surprised you most about building a company in the marketing world versus building a company in the developer tool space?
Yeah, it's a different ICP, it's a different persona. Marketers in general, probably Josh notwithstanding, tend to be a lot more trusting of kind of like tools and data and recommendations that are presented to them. I think developers are naturally very, very skeptical as people. And that's a kind of core difference where I don't think marketers are nearly as skeptical. And so the level of proof or work that you need to necessarily convince someone that something's a good idea or a bad idea is very different.
One thing I've learned, the best people to sell to are salespeople and marketers because they always they're sold. They're easily sold.
They're used to being sold to.
They're
yeah.
used to being
they're
sold
used to selling.
Yeah, and they want a solution.
Yeah.
The problem is retaining them is
Yes.
the hard part. Whereas developers and technical leaders, it's so hard to sell to them, but once you prove your value, you have such a long-lasting relationship. And something that's interesting as I hear you talking is my background is in sales and marketing. Your background is technical. My ICP are technical people. Your ICP people are sales and marketers, And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like we've switched places here. What has been, do you miss operating in a lane where you're speaking to people that are like-minded?
Not really. Actually, I think like when we were building developer tools, it's really hard, and this, like it's very hard to sell to developers. I think the build versus buy conversation has also gotten a lot harder with AI and coding agents, and so the bar there is super, super high, and I think we we were pushing really hard in a lot of conversations to make like very little progress, and it's very different in this world. So no, it's been great to really get to know and understand and work with kind of like new demographic.
How big's your team now?
We're a team of 5.
Okay. What's everyone's role?
So we have 2 engineers, including my co-founder. We have a founding product member, a founding operations member, and then myself.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. That's so small. You guys are doing so much. Have you fundraised since, or are you going to?
Yeah, we are pretty close to profitable actually as an organization. So fundraising is not necessarily, I think, like the default thing to do. I think if we can prove that, there's a great opportunity to kind of like pour more fuel on the fire and grow really fast, then we would go out and fundraise. But we're kind of in a position where we do control our own destiny in a lot of ways. We're not going to run out of money soon. We have capital to hire more folks if we need to, and so we haven't fundraised since that previous seed round, and we still have a lot of that capital left.
Incredible. Are you guys all in office together?
We are.
How has that been? 5 days a week?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think just being able to turn around, tap someone on the shoulder, get feedback on something, just brainstorm live is really, really huge.
When you look in the future, what's your 5-year vision? Is it to grow as big as possible? Is it to be acquired? Is it to be just running mega profitably? What are you hoping to achieve?
I want to be as big as possible, but I want to do that in kind of as sustainable of way as possible as well. I think I've seen a lot of venture-backed organizations perhaps raise too much or grow too fast, and there are, I think, downfalls to maybe just blindly trying to grow as fast as possible. You can end up being in a stage where you're really like fighting to kind of grow into a valuation that might be a little bit outsized, or you have a really, really large team and things slow down. That was actually part of kind of the problem we were looking at on the engineering side that we saw firsthand. And so, especially with the tools that exist today, it's really easy to operate effectively with a really, really small lean team. And so I think growth doesn't necessarily mean headcount, but we do want to grow. We do want to be big. We actually are working on kind of this like brand new, really large opportunity. We launched a product last week around optimizing not only for AI answers, but actually for kind of AI agents themselves. The biggest of which right now are probably kind of Claude Code and Cursor, where these tools are actually going and finding solutions and maybe writing those solutions directly into code bases for organizations. And so we're also seeing this big shift where organizations are becoming more and more agent-led or agent-focused in their products. So, as an example of this, Clay last week announced their MCP and CLI, and you can now run Clay as a fully headless product. Salesforce actually did the same, where they have Salesforce 360, where kind of the idea there is instead of your Salesforce being managed by humans, it's being managed by agents. And so I think we'll actually see this big shift over the next 5 years where more and more software is run and managed by agents rather than humans. And so we are spending a lot of time thinking about what does that look like from a marketing perspective, where maybe it's actually less about your marketing website and your marketing content and more about directly what context agents have on your business and controlling that.
How is it different?
Yeah, so the surfaces are pretty different. We'll see that when a coding agent, for example, looks like let's say you have a code base and you're early on in your project and you say, I need to set up a database. And so one of the things that we're seeing right now with like one of our customers is Supabase often is very much recommended as kind of like the default easiest way to set up a database. And they've seen absolutely exponential growth in terms of their like kind of all of their metrics. As a result of that, the surfaces that get hit by the coding agents are much more things like your docs and your SDKs and your GitHub pages, and a lot less like your listicles and your marketing website and your marketing copy or marketing content or even third-party websites.
I see. And so this customer that you're working with, are they a Supabase competitor? And they're trying to
we work with Supabase directly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it is them. So it's you guys. Great. Yeah, no, it's everywhere right now. So it's doing a great job. That's fascinating. So do you feel like you're going to be investing more resources into that, or is it still going to be pretty evenly split?
We see them as very complementary, and definitely there's overlap in techniques and different things. We are kind of pretty excited about this new thing in terms of actually coming back to like our developer tool roots to some degree, where the primary agents that folks are deploying in organizations right now are coding agents that run autonomously. I mean, if we look at our own organization, our engineers don't write lines of code anymore. It's all written by these coding agents, and they are interacting and managing fleets of multiple agents
Right.
to kind of go out and write code. And so it's actually what's enabled us to, because I think it's like pretty unusual even for a 5-person team to only be 40% R&D in that sense of 2 engineers. But what we've been able to get done with 2 engineers is insane. Like the amount of product that we've been able to kind of build is nothing like anything that I've seen previously. And so I think we'll see more verticalized agents. We're definitely seeing it in law and legal, right? Like Harvey and some of these other organizations, Legora. And we're seeing it in marketing too, actually. And we've built a marketing agent. We have pretty strong adoption of that across that stack. And I think anywhere, right, where there's kind of a verifiable task to be done, we're seeing more and more kind of deployment of agents. There's all the go-to-market agents and the AI SDRs and AI SREs and all sorts of things like that. And so, yeah, we believe that's probably just going to continue to grow. And so this surface is going to become more and more important.
I want to get back to your fundraise. What did you guys raise on? What valuation?
So we raised like 2.5 basically on 20, including the YC funding. So not all of that was on the 20 post, but
Right,
yeah.
of course. But I mean, I think that's an incredibly wise and thoughtful decision to not go, because I mean, I don't want to say you're so young, but I have 10 years on you. And so much of what I've learned over the last decade is watching startups do the like vanity play, where they go and they
Big
raise a bunch of
splashy
money,
raise, yeah.
they hire a bunch of headcount. And now it's kind of changed, obviously. Headcount is not like a vanity thing anymore, but raising money is, and it still is. And so for you to restrain yourself from wanting to go and make a huge splash and raise a whole bunch of capital is incredibly wise, because you have so much power and control. You don't have a board. You get to make all the decisions,
Yeah.
and anything north of 20 million, it's gravy. Not that you're necessarily going to do that, but you have so many options for your future. It's amazing. Did anyone give you any kind of mentorship advice? Did you see it through? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 core experiences really shaped that. And it's interesting being on the other side, because I think there's some learnings from us that we maybe could have been more aggressive, maybe raised a little more money or deployed it a little faster. But I think kind of the 2 core experiences were, one, I was very lucky that my first engineering job was at eShares, which then became Carta. And so I was spending a ton of time around a bunch of cap table data. And so I got to kind of see a lot of those metrics, those reports firsthand. Carta does a lot of like state of private market reports now. I was working on the investor services team there. And so got introduced to a lot of these like concepts very, very early in my career, even when I was in university. And then I basically worked through, worked at a bunch of startups through ZIRP and saw, a lot of things happen to a lot of different companies. And so I think, yeah, it's obviously great to like have a big splashy headline and raise a bunch of money. And but I think, yeah, like at least one learning that YC definitely shared is that people basically spend, like, you can predict how much someone will spend by how much they've raised.
Yeah.
And so, kind of like really being disciplined in, okay, how much money do we actually need to potentially get to, what our Series A milestones might look like, and then really only raising that amount. And we ran a successful process. I think it was about 7 days open to close for the seed round, and we hit our number, and then basically, yeah, closed it out.
So looking to the future now, in your immediate needs, you're looking to hire some sales and marketing folks. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Where are you wanting to focus more on? Sales, marketing, both? What does that look like?
I think sales actually. So but both. So I think as a team of 5, we're not trying to multi-thread on hiring. We're trying to hire one really good person at a time. And what we've just seen with the market that we're operating in is that, and this actually goes back to I think a lot of the stuff that I heard, working through ZIRP at startups, which is people always kind of talk about like, oh, there's this like land grab opportunity, and I think that's usually not true. But I'm getting more and more convinced that might actually be a little more true for some of the areas we're operating in. And the reason for that is we're just seeing the kind of like greenfield opportunity within the space, right? So really anyone who does SEO is and can be a customer of Gauge and be really successful with Gauge. And that's such a huge kind of like TAM or market, right? So we work with law firms, we work with hospitals, we work with public companies, B2B companies, CPG companies. And so the kind of range of potential people who could use Gauge is actually really, really large, and we can be really helpful to all of these companies. And right now, I think we're doing a bit of, it's more like trawling, where we kind of, go out there and talk to folks, or folks who come talk to us, we sign up and, can be really successful with, and we want to start spearfishing a bit more, going and finding, companies where there's like a really incredible match, where we can have a really large impact, and closing those companies. And we're starting to see evidence that we can do that. We're working with, now a number of Fortune 500 companies, large companies where that revenue is just also very durable. The contract sizes are pretty materially different than, say, the YC companies we work with, which we love working with. But I think there's just a huge opportunity where the market's quite soft and, maybe not quite a land grab, but I think a situation where we've really built what we believe is the best product in the space, and our customers also believe that. We've been able to pull really large logos from our competitors, but not a lot of people actually know about us. And I think our competitors have done a much better job of sales and marketing, and so they're much more well-known across kind of the industry, and so we're looking to kind of correct for that.
How long have they been around, your competitors?
Pretty similar amount of time, yeah.
Are they as technical as y'all?
No.
So you beat them on product.
Yes.
Which I know when we were, Josh, you were saying when you were early to looking at different companies, there was no one that could even hold a candle to what you guys had built or were building. How much bigger are their teams? Do you know?
Yeah. So there's a number of incumbents in the space, kind of SEO companies that have pivoted into this focus, which is, I wouldn't call it a full pivot. But companies like SEMrush and Ahrefs, which are huge, huge companies, thousands of employees. SEMrush actually recently got bought by Adobe for close to $2 billion.
Really?
As a result of basically this new focus area and opportunity.
Why would Adobe? What does Adobe see in them?
Adobe has a really large marketing suite that they sell into. And so they're integrating it into, I think Marketo is like their big marketing thing, but they have now products in the space. And they have like a really strong cross-sell pool there. Ahrefs as well. Ahrefs is actually a really cool company, bootstrapped, never raised VC funding, and has also started to build a lot in the space. And then there are other VC-backed competitors, the biggest of which is probably Profound. They're now like unicorn kind of status, so I think a couple hundred employees probably.
Wow. Advice, take it or leave it. When you're hiring a salesperson, usually hiring two at the same time is better than hiring one, because salespeople are really good at selling, and they're also really good at selling you why things aren't working. But if you hire two and you kind of give them the same expectations, they will hold each other to a higher standard or a higher bar, or they both suck and you get rid of them both. But usually, unless you have like a really good, right out the gate, someone that's just self-motivated, which unfortunately is not usually the case, hiring two, they keep themselves more accountable. But neither here nor there.
That's good advice, yeah.
Are you guys doing any kind of consulting as well, or is it just product-based?
We originally did, but I think what we've actually found is we'd rather just build a product that can deliver those consulting outcomes. And so we started originally like doing kind of the, like offer services and then, build that into, kind of like, like dog food and build product for those services. And so we still do offer some kind of like white glove, very close kind of core things for our best customers, best partners. But generally, like our goal is to kind of take those outcomes, build them into the product so people can be successful.
Without having to do it?
Yeah.
You could make a lot of money there too if you wanted to.
Yes.
In the future.
Yeah.
Josh, is there an angle you want me to go down? Well,
I've had this conversation a bunch of different times. It's Gauge, and I've had it with you guys. It's Gauge certification. Like it's owning the platform. Like to Jacqueline's point about like you can make a lot of money if your version of a forward deploy engineer.
Yeah.
Have you thought about going down the certifying people in your platform to build that kind of additional brand equity?
Definitely something we've thought about and something I think that could be quite lucrative. One, key indicator of this is we have already seen, I mean, so the product's been in market for about 14 months, and we've already seen folks take it from their organization to another organization, right? And so that's kind of an extension of that. And so, yeah, I think, again, we just do so well on the product vector. I think when folks are able to directly compare our product versus our competitors and things like that, it's a very clear decision. We've won competitive RFP processes where there's, like tens or even 20 kind of like applicants and providers. And so, yeah, I think having some more kind of like formal certification or course or training where we can, kind of like put a badge of approval or confidence in someone to, operate and be successful with our platform makes a lot of sense.
Let's move into you as a CEO. So you went from founding engineer and obviously a critical engineer on a lot of teams to now leading the organization. What has surprised you most about this role?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough in my last role at my last startup to start as a founding engineer in an IC and then move into management. So I've previously managed a team of 7, and so this is actually a smaller team. And so I wouldn't say there's been too many surprises. One thing I found is that management's definitely easier in person versus remote, and so I do really think there's a lot of benefits for the company. There are definitely downsides too, like the talent pool is much smaller, but very dense here, so there's kind of ups and downs there. Other biggest surprises, probably the less surprises about specifically being a CEO, but in terms of being a founder, kind of that realization that there's no, like maybe your investors kind of occupy this role, but there's no boss or someone else who cares if your work gets done or if you kind of accomplish your goals. It's really self-motivated. It's all down to you. And so, and I think in the way that we raised our round, we basically raised on notes. We don't have a lead investor. It really is, kind of my co-founder and I, and down to the goals that we set for ourselves and the goals that we want to accomplish. And so no one's out there telling you, that you have to do this or you have to achieve X by Y date. It's really kind of self-motivating and finding that self-motivation. And so that's been a big difference, but something I really enjoy. I think I, as a person, very much value independence and having that control. And so that's been really, really good. And then hiring's hard. I feel like hiring feels like this perpetually unsolved problem for everyone at every company, where it kind of, each company takes their different flavor of it, but certainly learnings in doing that and in learning new areas. So, I mean, even in hiring engineers, that's completely changed in the past year or two. And so, where I think a lot of my previous skills would apply, they don't. And so it's a lot of learning new skills, right? Especially hiring salespeople, to your point. Salespeople are good at selling. How do you actually get signal out of that process, build that process, execute that successfully? And so, I'm very lucky to also have, among our investor group and among our network, folks who have done it before, who we can go to for advice, YC included.
Yeah, we're in such a new era right now with the new tools and everything and adoption, and it's just what I've learned recently, at least, because you're right, we've been hiring people since 2018, and obviously I had experience hiring people before, and lately, because things are moving so quickly, what we've decided to do is just fire quickly. Like if it's not working out, as unfortunate as it is, it's just, we have to move on. Everybody has to move on. It's not going to be a fit for them. It's not going to be a fit for you. Because it surprises me still to this day of when you bring on 2 people who went through the entire process that seem almost identical, how wildly different they are day to day. And you mentioned something about being in person. It's much easier to manage in person. I think it's also much easier to be an employee being in person because you can read these nonverbal signals if someone's upset with you or frustrated with you that you don't necessarily get through that virtual world.
Yeah.
The problem is this new generation is really, they have a strong aversion to wanting to go and be in person. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and maybe advice or commentary around that subject.
I mean, I'd at least say for the new generation, not all of them. We definitely have talked to folks and hired folks, from kind of the newest generation, newest workforce who have a strong appetite to be in person and work really hard and join a startup and move to
great.
San Francisco and execute on that. And I think that appetite has been good signal for us. It's not everyone, yeah, certainly, but I think you obviously have like some very big disadvantages and advantages as an early stage startup when it comes to hiring in the talent pool. You're not going to pay 99th percentile. You're not going to compete with larger orgs and especially like the AI labs and things like that. But you can offer a lot of ownership, a lot of autonomy, and a very unique experience, right? Being here, being on the ground floor of something like this. It was the experience that I got to go through in previous organizations, and I think that is when you find someone who's really searching for that specifically, a lot of other things can work.
Have you guys been hearing about the 996 culture that everyone
Yeah.
is promoting? Do you guys do that?
No, so yeah, I was actually in the same YC batch as like Nico Lacqua, Corgi guys, all of that. I think totally respect like kind of like that approach if that's the approach you want to take, and I think it optimizes for a certain type of person and folks who want to come in. I think the way that we operate is it's definitely not just 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, clock in, clock out. It's much more of thinking about kind of building a company in this journey as a marathon, and so it's a long journey, and there are times when we need to sprint where we will need to come in on the weekend to get something over the line or work really, really late to push something over. But I think one of the things I've seen is you don't want to work just for work's sake. You want to create leverage, right? And so we try to kind of reserve when we're going to do that, when we're going to push really hard for when we need to push really hard. And then we can take time to recover when it's not as important versus just kind of push really, really hard all of the time and burn yourself out. Because I think people can do that for maybe like a year or two, but it does become really, really tough. Or you optimize for an even smaller kind of talent pool who's interested in that specific experience. And that's, I think, a bit of like an experiment that's getting run right now. So at least that's how we think about it.
Benefits. Are you having to give like great benefits? Do you feel like people don't care so much about benefits anymore? Back when I would say 10 years ago, benefits package really mattered to people.
Yeah, I think we try to make it not a question. So we try to offer really good benefits. I haven't had concern specifically about it, but we offer benefits have gotten a lot cheaper to offer too, I think. So there's a lot of startups and companies, things that we're able to do to bring down that cost. And so, yeah, we try to offer best-in-class healthcare, 401k matching, all the kind of like benefits you would expect to have. And it's not that crazy when it comes to our top line, so.
Yeah, with 5 too, so.
Yeah.
But, okay, now we can change gears. So what would you say right now, like when you think of the average person that you're talking to, what is their assumptions about AI, or would you say is like their most overrated assumptions, like when you're talking to a customer for the first time?
I think there's 2 camps of people we talk to, pretty much. There are basically like kind of the AI skeptics and like the AI converts, and there's differences between the two. I think, yeah, a lot of people have not realized how far AI has progressed in like the last year or two, especially if you're working maybe at a larger organization where access is restricted or you don't have access to kind of the latest and greatest. And so there's a lot of maybe like recurring discourse around things like hallucinations or capabilities where it's come really, really far. And it's not that those things don't exist, but AI can genuinely do real meaningful volume of work and execute on that effectively. We recently had like a really, really large organization where someone was basically able to take a workflow with Gauge that took them like 4 or 5 days down to a couple hours. And that's, partially, of course, due to like what we've built around like that specific problem, but a lot of that is due to like how fast the capabilities of the models have advanced. And so there's a bit of a lag in understanding that it's easy to forget when you're here in San Francisco and talking to a bunch of YC startups that that exist, but that gap or delta is definitely still something we come across regularly. And then on the other side, I think for folks that are kind of like full AI converts, we see almost this like blind trust, which I am pretty hesitant of almost like believing everything that AI says, or taking kind of a question and just always kind of putting it to AI and returning the AI answer. And AI is a really powerful tool, but it's not necessarily an oracle, right? And so one example of this, like in AEO, GEO, is, and this actually maybe is getting slightly better because now there's more data on how this stuff works. But originally we'd see a lot of people go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, hey, how do I show up in ChatGPT?
Yeah.
And ChatGPT doesn't, it's fundamentally basically like kind of like token predictor. It's going to spit out a bunch of words. And so ChatGPT would very confidently give like a list of things that you could do that were entirely uncorrelated to the things that actually work. And that's just because the things that actually work weren't in its training set or in its data set, right? This is a very new industry. And so a lot of times we talk to folks where they're basically like, well, I asked ChatGPT what I should do, and it's differing completely from the advice that you're giving. But the advice we're giving is grounded in kind of the experiments we've run and all the data that we have collected on the models, versus basically what the model is trying to do there is just predict the most likely thing that would serve as a real answer in that case. And so that's something we kind of, we'll see a lot.
Is it easy? Is that objection easy to overcome?
Usually, I think it's not too hard to overcome. I think because we have the data to back it up and ground it. So.
Are you afraid of ChatGPT or Claude getting good enough to where it is predicting it the same or giving answers in the same way?
One unique thing about what we do is that we are actually kind of fundamentally, and this is, I think, there's this whole spiel around, like a lot of companies are kind of ChatGPT wrappers and things like that, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but something that we see or something that's like kind of unique about Gauge is we're actually kind of counter-positioned to the model labs, right? Because we're trying to directly optimize or help folks show up as much as possible or get recommended over their competitors for the model labs. And so in the same way that like the SEO industry exists and Google exists, I think there will always actually be this industry, just because what Google tells you to do to optimize for Google is helpful but not the full story, because Google is not going to tell you to do things that they don't want you to do, right? And there is this kind of bucket of things that they don't necessarily want you to do that do work, right? And so that's where I think this industry comes in to play, where there's fundamentally kind of like that counter positioning.
Yeah, that's true. That is really true. Fascinating. What a great spot to be in.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever leave the Bay Area and go talk to companies outside?
Yeah, I'm going to New York next week actually, and then Seattle the week after that for some conferences, some customer conversations, some sales conversations. So definitely I think being in person is very powerful. We see a lot of value in that, and I wouldn't say it's something we do as much as we probably should, but it is something we do.
Does it surprise you how much farther behind these other cities are, or they tend to be?
It varies. I think New York and Seattle as examples, not so bad. We did do a trip over to Europe, and like the conversations there are very different than the conversations here. So I wouldn't say it's surprising. I mean, it's surprising in the sense that like you can kind of forget it when you're in this like little bubble. But I think I do have the advantage of, again, like right now, so like I'm basically running all of our sales processes. And so I get to talk to a lot of people from all over the world constantly, like who come in. So we get to talk to people from lots of different backgrounds and geographies. And so I think that helps ground it for me.
Are you going to continue to stay in the sales conversations even as you build out your sales team?
100%. I think like the way that, a big piece of advice that I've gotten previously is, a lot of companies will hire salespeople too early, or they'll hire a salesperson when sales is not working and hope for them to make it work. But if you as a founder haven't figured out or got something that's working, then that's going to be a disaster, right? And so I think for us, with the amount of growth that we've seen, with the amount of revenue that we're at, I do feel like I've learned how to sell our product and learned how to speak to our product and do that. I have maybe like more of a specific sales style that's going to be different than someone who we bring in potentially, but I think the way that person's successful is that I sit with them on like every single deal for a couple months and really stay close to the whole process, and then then we can hopefully have more of an engine or something that's replicable. And so something I definitely am doing as we like think about hiring this role is also writing down a lot of like what are the things that I do, how do I think about these things, what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, I would say you're spot on. The number one mistake I see technical founders make is hiring a salesperson and just not doing it themselves because no one knows more, has more information than you. And you'll always have the most information because you also see the future. So you know exactly where the past has been, you see the future, and you have every single answer in between. So
Yeah.
you
No,
will
I mean,
always be
you're-
the best salesperson.
Yeah, your best salesperson is your founders, right? So I definitely agree with that, and I think I have an unfair advantage in these conversations. Also, in just not being a salesperson or having a sales title, like people, people don't really want to talk to salespeople a lot of the time. Although, like you said, sales and marketing are much more open to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, but you also get like more deference and especially depending on who your buyer is. But if you're talking to the CMO, they don't want to talk to a salesperson.
Yeah.
They at least want to talk to a CMO as well. But if they're talking to the CEO, they're going to be
Helps.
really happy about that.